Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about partials and when they might be useful. Because there are oftentimes exceptions to rules, and you guys will hear me say, realistically, we shouldn't really be doing a lot of partials, right? They're not going to give us the muscle mass and the carryover that we want as raw lifters. And generally speaking, if we're not doing max work or speed work, we're chasing hypertrophy. We're chasing hypertrophy. And longer ranges of motion are generally associated with more muscle mass. Now, I will add the caveat there, though, that there's been some meta analysis on that's found that longer ranges of motions, the association with more hypertrophy is actually pretty weak. It's there, but we're not talking large differences in the context of a varied program. And in other words, if you're only doing one exercise that works a muscle and you're intentionally doing a movement pattern that cuts several inches out of the range of motion, yeah, you're possibly going to gain a little bit less muscle from it. And we need to be clear there. It's going to be a little bit. It's not going to be like double, right? It's not going to be double. You're not going to only gain half your gains, but it could be very, very slight. A few percentages difference. You might gain 5% less muscle. So not a huge deal, but if we're chasing maximum size, it is something to think about. It is absolutely something to think about. Now, if we're doing multiple exercises, it becomes less important, and here's why. Because if you're doing at least one exercise, it's kind of a full range of motion, puts us in the lengthened position, and then you're doing a second exercise throughout the week for those same muscles or muscle groups, it's not really going to be noticeable. You're probably not going to see a difference in hypertrophy over that one movement, because now we are effectively hitting more lengthened positions. We're getting deeper stretches. And now, if we're just skipping a lockout, sometimes shortened positions, you're probably not going to see any measurable difference in hypertrophy. So, there's different types of partials. But usually it's when we are removing range of motion from the lengthened position. That would be like the bottom of the bench press, the bottom of the squat. But, the argument could be made that slightly shorter squats may hit the glutes a little harder at the expense of the quads and the adductors. So when we get into multi-joint movements, these things change a little bit. Now, that being said, I also don't believe in the whole carryover thing, or overload training, meaning you have to get used to handling the heavier weight, and so therefore, you can do these half reps or whatever with a heavier weight to get used to having the weight in your hands or on your back. I think that's silly personally. I don't think it's supported by evidence, either anecdotally or in the literature. Now, when does that mean that we might actually benefit from some partials? Well, you could use them for max effort work. In other words, on max effort work, all we're trying to do is create strain and maximize intramuscular coordination and things on a heavy single. So can we pull off blocks? Could we pull off pins? Sure. Now, I don't recommend half reps. I'm going to say it's really stupid to pull, at the knee or higher. All right, now we're getting ridiculous, because a deadlift is already technically a partial. Same thing with the bench press. If you have a thicker chest and rib cage, the bench press is a little bit of a partial already. It doesn't always have the deepest stretch at the bottom, depending upon your structure. So reducing that further, too much can be a problem. Look, if you want to max off a 1 or a 2 board, probably fine. We start getting it shorter and shorter. You start getting towards half reps, though, probably a waste. But, if we're just trimming out 10% of the range of motion to get a different exercise, and it's just max effort work, it's different because we're not concerned with a lot of hypertrophy, and then we're going to do full range of motion training after. So if you just need the variations because of lack of equipment, perfectly fine. The people who only have one barbell and we need to rotate, various max effort work, yeah, some pin work, some block work. for maxes is perfectly reasonable in that context. I don't think it has an advantage, meaning you're not doing it because, oh, you're getting some overload advantage. No, it's just letting you break things up. Also, if you have been suffering a little bit of overuse in the lengthened positions, okay, might not be bad to do floor pressing or board pressing or whatever for, say, your max effort benching. Right? If you've been getting a lot of pec tendon inflammation from the lengthened positions, and the same could be said on different movements. We could definitely utilize that. Now, especially for your maxes, but the same could be said for our assistance work and accessory work, right? When we are dealing with inflammation, which again is oftentimes a sign of overuse. In order for us to continue to train, we sometimes need to pull that out. So a perfect example, if one of my lifters has been getting, a little bit of tendon inflammation in the insertions in their pecs, and let's say we've been doing cambered bar work or a lot of dumbbell work for their chest, all right, we might want to run a phase where we take a little range of motion out, meaning then benching to a one board for a few weeks, doing floor press for a couple weeks only, and avoiding those deeper stretch positions where the muscles lengthen there might be okay because we're still getting good growth stimulus, we're still training, but we're also working around some overuse inflammation or working around possible injuries while still allowing us to train hard. So there's a place for that. Absolutely a place for that. So I don't want people to think that I'm saying we never use these things, because I definitely tend to go very heavy on floor presses and stuff for my lifters who have some shoulder issues or shoulder inflammation, at the anterior delt area, or again, some tendon inflammation. And the same could be said for some other movements. Let's say we're getting some patellar tendonitis. We're getting some, or at least inflammation in the patellar tendon. All right. Well, in that case, we might want to do some box work a little bit higher for our squatting. Or we might want to take it an inch or two above parallel for either pen work, box work, things like that. Okay, makes sense. We want to take that strain off the tendon, while then maybe doing some sort of restorative work for it as well. It could be leg extensions with bands. So there is a place for this. And I don't have a problem with using these things in that context. So again, we need to not be dogmatic. So when I say I am generally not a fan of partials, we do need to understand that there are very clear and good exceptions to that rule. Okay, there are exceptions to that rule, depending upon and possible limiting people's personal range of motion. And I also want to make that point before I shut this down, that if your personal range of motion of your joints and your structure isn't what appears to be full range of motion by other standards, that's also not a partial, meaning we can move as far as our bone structure allows us to move. And if you have a bone structure limitation, that is a full range of motion movement if you're hitting it. So let's not confuse those either. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.